In the last chapter, Jacob's wife Leah gave birth to 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Jacob's favorite wife Rachel wasn't having any babies. God had blessed Leah with fertility because she was overlooked by her husband. So how does the favorite wife respond? When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She was red in the face, even though she was her husband's favorite, even though she was beautiful and desired, even though Jacob had worked hard for her. Sometimes we look right past the blessings around us because we're focused on the one thing we don't have. She said to Jacob, "Give me children or I shall die." Sounds like Esau, right? Give me the red stuff or I'll die. They thought their lives depended on getting exactly what they wanted when they wanted it. But Abraham and Sarah had to wait for a promised son. Rebekah had to wait for a son. Isaac had to wait for an open well. Jacob had to wait for a wife. And now Rachel's in a time of waiting. And look at what waiting does. It stirs up the question, where does true life come from? For Rachel, her life depended on having children. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Notice that Jacob and Rachel have barely mentioned God until it's time to blame him for something. Jacob could be comforting his wife, but he's making things worse. He doesn't understand that God is an abundant giver. They've bought into the lie that if God is blessing someone else, it must mean that he's working against me. I remember in some of the darkest times in my life thinking, God, you must get some kind of sick thrill out of kicking me down again and again. Those moments tend to reveal what we're believing about God. Where does true life come from? Sometimes we don't see it until we've pursued the wrong thing. Then she said, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go into her so that she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her." Sounds familiar, right? It's like Sarah giving Hagar to Abraham. Bilhah has 2 sons, Dan, which means basically God has vindicated me, and Naphtali, which conveys a struggling or prevailing over her sister, even though Leah is still winning the baby war 4-2. Well, it's been a while since Leah has had babies, so she also gives Jacob her servant Zilpah. And Zilpah has 2 sons. There's Gad, which means good fortune, and Asher, which comes from the phrase, "Women will call me happy." Then in verse 14, we come to the mandrake story. In the days of wheat harvest, Reuben, that's Leah's firstborn, went and found mandrakes, or some kind of plant, in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. We assume this Hebrew word dudaim refers to mandrakes or something similar that was thought to be an aphrodisiac or fertility aid. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." Some, not all. Rachel's willing to compromise. She wants kids. Well, Leah takes it personally. She says, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" To Leah, the gift from her son was a token of love. Rachel picks up on the underlying need, and she strikes a bargain. Jacob can spend the night with Leah if Leah gives Rachel the mandrakes. Well, Leah agrees with the plan, and verse 17 says, "And God listened to Leah." And she has 3 more kids. There's Issachar, which means he rewards, Zebulun, which probably means something like honoring or elevating, and then a daughter named Dinah, which is the feminine equivalent to Dan, so judged or vindicated. So now Leah has had 7 kids. That's an important number. What about the mandrakes? Well, apparently they didn't help Rachel. The story's not interested in folklore. God is in control of all things. So finally, verse 22 says, "Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb." After all that time, Rachel has her own son. It's worth noting this phrase, God remembered. That's covenantal language. We saw it with Noah in chapter 8 and with Abraham in chapter 19. So Rachel realizes the source of blessing and says, "God has taken away my reproach." And she called his name Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." So then Jacob goes to Laban and says, "Send me away that I may go to my own home and country." The plan all along was to go back after a while. Esau was expected to cool down at some point, and God had told Jacob in Bethel that he would return safely to the land. Laban says, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I will give it." Not sure why he needed divination to figure that out, but he's weird. So what does Jacob want for wages? He says, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later, when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Most likely the normal sheep were white, and the normal goats were black. So Jacob's saying, let me just have the ones with weird markings and we'll call it square. And Laban agrees, at least he pretends to. But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on them, and every lamb that was black, and put them in the charge of his sons. So he's taking Jacob's share. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. So Jacob has nothing to start with for himself. We've got white sheep and black goats, and they're Laban's, and he wants to breed them to get speckled and spotted sheep and goats. Well, dark-colored alleles are recessive in sheep and goat DNA, so some of the solid-colored animals are naturally going to have offspring with speckles and spots. But what he does next is bizarre and a little hard to follow. We don't know how much time passes between each step of this process. Second, it's not always clear which animals are being designated. And third, the text doesn't give us any rationale behind what he's doing. The big picture is clear, he's pulling a fast one on Laban, but it's hard to fill in some of the gaps. Let's take a look. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. Now that word white in Hebrew is Laban. It's the same as Laban's name. So I think we're meant to see the story as an exposing or undoing of Laban. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred or became hot in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. There are a couple ways to understand this. Apparently there's an old superstition that whatever is in a sheep's visual field when it's mating can be imprinted on the offspring. So Jacob puts up the striped sticks and the patterns impress on the babies. Of course that wouldn't work scientifically, but it's possible that God allowed it to work in spite of Jacob's flawed understanding. Another possibility is found in the flexible preposition in verse 39. The sheep breeding in front of the sticks could be breeding on or against the sticks. I'll let you use your imagination, but this could mean that Jacob is controlling which sheep are actually mating with real sheep and which are mating against the Laban rods. And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. So these animals keep reproducing, and Jacob plays wingman for the anomalous sheep. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. That's common sense. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So he's selectively breeding speckled and spotted animals, and he's not letting Laban's strong animals reproduce. So Laban's flocks are getting progressively weaker. After a while, he can sell animal products and hire employees and buy more animals, and so his business booms. Weird story, but again, people scheme, but ultimately God is committed to blessing.